Hi, Joe Zimmerman. I'm a junior here at the college. Mr. Whedon, I was very surprised to hear Shepherd Book say something like that. And I was wondering if that reflects sort of a belief that he has in something beyond God. And if so, whether you share that belief, whether it's referring to the same sort of humanist faith in human nature that you were talking about before.
Yeah, I would say that, I don't know, it depends on if you mean beyond God to mean the sort of warm, fuzzy, new agey thing that most people who want to sort of vaguely have belief but not really put their minds to it go and say, well, I think there's a greater force. And I always think, does that mean alien invasion? I mean, force scares me. I do think that Shepherd Book, I designed him to be a very old school sort of John Ford, roll your sleeves up type preacher, like Ward Bond and the Searchers. But to be somebody who is enormously tolerant and ultimately knows that what that character needs, what Mal needs, is to care about what he's doing, to admit that he cares about what he's doing, and that the good works will follow from there. He's not about to try and indoctrinate him on his death pile of junk. But yeah, he was always meant to be kind of, that great sort of old-fashioned sort of Puritan, but still living in the world, both things. Of course, Ron himself is a Buddhist, which sort of influenced how Shepherd Book came about. So he's definitely, in his image, one thing, but in his belief, yes, he's more diffuse and very humanist, because he doesn't need people to believe what he believes.
Thanks.
Cool.
Hi, I'm David Robinson. I'm a junior at the college. The monsters and demons in your books are notorious for representing real adversaries that we face, whether it's growing up or seeking redemption. Given that there are multiple cases of religious cults being used as villains in your stories, does this reflect your view of a history filled with both literal and figurative witch hunts? And do you see organized religion as a cult?
Well, I would say yes and no. I'm trying to decide which one of me is going to answer this. Ultimately, there's the classic, we referred to this as the Crucible in Space, and more actually a high school production of the Crucible in Space. We know when it's cheesy, but, and ultimately that kind of classic parochial intolerance is it's very useful in both horror and westerns. So it's something that I've drawn on again, time and again. To call organized religion a cult, I think, doesn't fit the bill because, simply put, a cult by definition has to be marginalized to an extent. And when something gets that big, it loses cult status. A mob? I'm not sure what I'd call it. I've seen things in religious rituals that have offended me. They've offended me because they had nothing to do, say at a funeral, with the person who was supposed to be honored. They were ritual, in and of themselves. And they represented a sort of backing away from the individuality of the person who was there, either being buried or married or whatever the case may have been. But ultimately, again, that's been created through a contract with a bunch of people who all felt the same need that we're feeling. So I can't really just write it off as a cult. I can write it off as something that I think is outdated. But again, we don't have a system that necessarily is ready to replace it for a lot of people. Therefore, if they argued against it, I wouldn't be strong about it. These guys, your small town witch hunts, they do represent something bigger. They do represent a bigger intolerance and a bigger intractability amongst religious people. But it also has to do more with just, the evil of men and not necessarily their belief.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrew Marr, sophomore here at the college, and I think that's just a really powerful portrayal of death, and death's a concept that's really a mystery to people, and I think religions have tried to sort of answer that question with various forms of the afterlife. But how would you, especially as a parent, explain the significance of the end of life?
For most of my life, I was just petrified. I could not think about death, not for 30 seconds at a stretch. When I realized, that I was an atheist and that there was nothing waiting for me but worms, I freaked out so mightily, and I just put it out of my head. I just wouldn't deal with it. I just said, you know what? I can't. I'm not ready. I just look at the shiny thing over here. Oh, she killed a vampire. Such a brave girl. And I think that ultimately it really just had boiled down to, I always hate the idea that there's a party going on that I'm not invited to, and once you're dead, you don't go to any of them. But yeah, mostly then the biggest change came when I had kids. And it is, well, oddly enough, I think the most beautiful piece of advice on parenting that was ever given to me was given to me by George Lucas. He said, the great thing about being a parent is that you don't matter as much anymore, which is very odd to hear from somebody in Hollywood. But it's something I've taken with me, because as soon as my son was born, I went, oh, I can die. It did not, and it wasn't just, oh, my seed will be carried on. It wasn't that, or even my name, because my children have my wife's name. It was just, I loved something way more than my pathetic self, and I was no longer as invested in the continuation of my pathetic self, and I was able to accept what I was already coming to, which was, I'd been reading about Buddhism a great deal, and Buddhism is very appealing. I think as a religion it comes from a very beautiful place and answers a lot of the things that non-believers ask, but then they want you to relinquish everything, and I was like, even Sky High on Blu-ray, I have to give that away too, and so I couldn't quite. It's almost so close to being the Dalai Lama, but or Pope, but what I even before the birth of my son, what I was getting to philosophically and then ultimately emotionally was espoused in Buffy, the idea that what is terrible about a vampire is that they don't die, that they are trying to buck the system, which again in Hollywood is something that has resulted in grotesque monsters who all look like this. There is a natural way to mature and to become older and to let go of certain things and eventually to let go of life that is the biggest thing that people need to accept and the hardest thing and the thing that keeps people most entrenched. We want to believe we're going to go on forever, of course. We want to believe that we'll be able to do all the things we can do now, of course. We want to believe that when we end, there's going to be ice cream and cake and we play hooky every day. That's just, why wouldn't we? It's the first terrifying realization we're going to die, but you do eventually come to a place of, well, I'm not the point. And if you do try to buck the system, it is monstrous. You do have to take your place in the cycle, and when your time is up, well, worms are hungry and they're cute. And it's great to be able to say that and actually mean it, because I had my characters saying it while I was still going, but not me, not death. I'm young and my hairline isn't receding. What? This mirror is broken. So now it's the most important thing. Death as a part of life is part of the message that I'm always trying to put out there, because it's the thing that we seem to be running from the most in our culture. And it's the thing that we need to accept inevitably without exception.
Well, I'm Greta Fryer. I'm a sophomore here, and I think this is just a pivotal moment in Angel, because it's the moment where Angel stops trying to help people because he thinks he has to, because the higher powers are saying, this is how you're going to atone for your past sins, this is your destiny, and decides, well, I don't really think there's anyone looking out and caring whether I do this or not, but I have to do it for me, which is a lot of what you were talking about earlier in your speech. And I was just wondering about, well, morality without God is a huge theme of humanism, and dealing with that question is something we do every day. Could you talk about how that influenced your characters, both in Angel, and how it influenced your own life?
It's a question I've been asking for years. About 14 years ago, I was sitting with my wife, asking her that very basic question. Okay, if there is no structure, no commandments, then why don't we just tear each other apart? And what she put forth was very simply, it's survival of the species. We know that if we do this, the species goes away on some cellular level. We understand this. So I was like, okay, I guess we'd call that evolutionary morality. And I wasn't completely satisfied, but I hadn't heard anything better. A couple of years ago, that offhand remark of my wife's at dinner became what is pretty much the reigning theory about morality without religion, which I find sort of hilarious, and also think that I'm really cool to be married to my wife. But ultimately, in myself, it's interesting, but my characters usually do better than me. But that's why we write in the first place, to find our darkest place and then lift it up into the light where we wish we were standing. Angel ultimately does become the real hero for exactly that reason. I would like to point out, of course, that she answers what he says with the fact that he just performed what is ultimately a little miracle, and that was put in, again, on purpose, just to let there be countering views. But his is mine. Probably put more succinctly than I ever have. I didn't create any of these characters in order to answer this need or ask this question. I created heroes, at first female. I created the female hero not to be a feminist, but because that's what interested me, a female hero. I created Angel and found myself completely at sea, because he was a hero in the normal image of a hero. He was a strong, lonesome man in a dark black coat, and I thought, I'm fucked. I got no idea what to do with this guy, except beat him down for as long as possible and then send him to the ballet. Which, apparently I really don't understand heroics one bit, but what was interesting was because I had no context. Buffy went through a lot, but I always had a very firm base with her. She's the guy you don't see coming. She was my avatar. She was, the girl in the picture, whereas Angel was a straight-up hero, and that made him much harder to write. So figuring out why he was doing what he was doing became the central question. Ultimately, it didn't really change the show. The show changed itself naturally every year while we tried to figure out what it was about. But it was the thing that took him to the closest thing he's had to peace that he's ever had, and that was a nice resolution. It was nice for me that he went out in action. Buffy had to figure something out at the end of her run on television, and that something was that power is something you share, that being a chosen one is not nearly as interesting as being one of the many, and that whereas Angel, he just went out doing his work, and because he'd already sort of figured out where he needed to be, and yeah, that was the place where he did it.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm a sophomore at the college. And Mr. Whedon, you're known for creating these very strong female characters, and that kind of naturally leads us to the question of who would win in a fight, Buffy Summers or River Tam?
Ironically, I was not prepared for that question. Okay, I think we gotta do this democratically. Let's get a show of hands. Buffy. River. And the blonde goes down. It'd be River. You know, I think Buffy's stronger, but when you're just programmed to kill, you just, it's a thing.
Thanks. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that character's role, why you named her Faith, why she had the troubles that she had, and what was kind of going on when you're doing that. Thanks.
What's up with Faith? The name, Angel, Faith, it's almost like a theme. I can't put my finger on it. I didn't, when I called Angel because he was potentially going to be Hispanic. So it didn't, I hadn't learned about irony at the point. And Faith, ultimately, again, didn't choose the name based on the idea that she would be the person who would question it the most. Her arc for me was basically kind of like Spike's. She was sort of the more mature version of Buffy, in the way that Spike was the more mature version of Angel. Buffy and Angel were sort of the classic sort of, kiddie romance, Romeo and Juliet, Twilight, if you will. Whereas, Spike and Faith represented people who came at their humanity in a much more sideways fashion, and ultimately where we got to with Faith was a question of really questioning, first of all discounting, and then genuinely questioning things that Buffy, as sort of generalissimo of the Slayers, had to take as just take on Faith, basically. That Faith was the person who got to always be the dissenting voice and always ask the question. That continues even in the comic book, where she basically decided to turn her back on slaying and become sort of a proto-counselor for Slayers. Some of these things happened by chance. Faith went to jail. Here's a common theme that you may have noticed throughout the evening, because of my wife, who said she should go to jail. I was like, we've worked that out. She leaves town. She left town in the Buffy thing. It doesn't make any sense. She should go to jail. I'm like, I literally yelled at her, shut up! I'm genius, man. Look, an article says I'm a genius. The next day I went into work. I was like, I have an idea. But it really was, and then of course we all said, oh yes, that's of course the next thing for her is to, admit that she had taken a wrong turn. But it was always sort of, being extreme in one way, being extreme in the other, and looking for that middle ground in a way that Buffy had to, but not in the same sort of mature fashion. So she really was, the sort of, not the devil on Buffy's shoulder, the humanist.
Hi. I feel a little more comfortable asking this question now that we voted on who would win in a fight. I'm just really curious what you thought of the Battlestar Galactica finale.
I couldn't believe it when... Oh, I'm not going to speak. We're going to have to talk about it afterwards. There's no way I can talk about it without spoiling it.
Thumbs up or thumbs down?
There were aspects of it that I felt unsatisfied by, and there were aspects of it that I loved very much. And more I will not say.
Thank you.
I cannot use my thumbs at this time. They are spoiler thumbs.
Hi, my name is Allison. I'm a senior at Brown University. I have a two-part question, but I'll try to keep it short. The first part is, as a writer, could you talk a little bit about the process of character development in Firefly and how you found these 9 very distinct characters and sketched them out so quickly and so thoroughly, even within just the first couple episodes of a short-lived series? The second part is, if you have the chance, would you do the Dance of Joy?
Well, I think some of you may know my answer to the second question already. No. No, I do not do the Dance of Joy. In fact, I do not even remember the Dance of Joy. I did silly dances with my kids all last night. You missed them all. There may have been aspects of joy in them, and some freestyling and some jazz hands. But no, I will not bless your hearts dance even for you. And what was the first question again?
If you could speak as a writer about the process of character development in Firefly.
Yes, Firefly. Well, basically, there are two answers to that. One is that, I wanted to build a large ensemble so that I could have what we refer to as the Golden Girls effect, where that anything that happened to one person affected everybody else, and you had a lot of your work done for you. That they would represent all sort of different ideas and viewpoints, and I just sort of free associated what characters would interest me and where I would want to go with them and who would not get along with whom and who would be interesting. And I started with Mal. You start with your main character, and then you just sort of build from there. There's got to be somebody who might betray him. There's got to be his right-hand woman. There's got to be the adolescent girl with superpowers. I tried to stay away from it. And somebody who represents religion, somebody who represents the alliance. You go through, a giant conversation in your head, find every viewpoint, and that's your cast. The short answer to that question is Stagecoach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Joss. I'm Matt. I'm a screenwriting student at Emerson College. And as a writer, when it comes to writing characters with different points of view, especially religious than your own, is there ever anything inside that's like, no, don't put that out there? Or is it just, at that point, it's the character?
What if I make a Christian? Holy God. No, ultimately, I wrote a Christmas miracle. I'm shameless. The fact is, I take from these mythical structures because they're what I grew up on. And they resonate. They resonate with us because they always have, which means they resonate emotionally and not just as mythos. And therefore, I want to hear the viewpoint of somebody I disagree with. I am somebody I disagree with. There's a dialogue. Sometimes there's a crowd scene going on. There's villagers in my head. It's loud. It never stops. And I take little pills with a K in them to go to sleep. But that's more than perhaps you wanted to know. I just think that if you don't, I think sometimes that I'm a terrible drama writer because I always want everybody to be able to espouse their viewpoint perfectly and be the avatar of, if it's the guy who collects the trash, he's like, I want to give him a speech about how he collects the trash, what it means to collect the trash, and just make him the most awesome trash collecting guy. And if everybody always articulates exactly how they feel, conflict is not so much, except that they disagree. And so ultimately, I'm interested in their viewpoints enough to want to give everybody the floor. I think that the actions that people take in the shows ultimately speak for themselves. What would I put on all of them? Personal responsibility. People taking responsibility for their actions, whether or not they've done the right thing or not. Beyond that, I don't care what people believe. I really don't. And I'd like everybody to think like me, but then what would I do for a living? So ultimately, this is the one part of drama that I do think I have a piece of, which is letting two people that you love disagree and not knowing whom to choose. And if that makes somebody think, well, this guy's right and Joss is wrong, I'm okay with that because they are all to an extent me.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Zach Beecham. I'm a junior at Brown. And my question is that, a lot of the discussion tonight about morality is centered around the question of why we ought to be moral, absent a God. But there's a separate, and I think in my mind, equally important question, which is, without a God to tell us what being moral means, what are the moral rules by which we ought to operate? And it seems like in your shows, even the characters can't make up their own minds. For example, in season 2 of Buffy, she decides that it's the right thing to do would be to kill Angel, someone she loves, to save the rest of humanity, whereas in season 5, she says she wouldn't do it again because she can't make that type of personal sacrifice or do something that she thinks is wrong, even for a greater good, and then reverses her mind again in season 7. So well, I guess my question is there any intent to convey a certain set of ethical principles throughout the show, those normative first-order moral principles that you're trying to get across, or is it more diffuse?
It's about the search for those principles. And her search is my own. Those are questions that came up that I had to answer. I knew she had to kill Angel for dramatic reasons. I mean, that was a winner. But beyond that, it was a debate, and not just with me, but with all my writers. There was an extraordinary team of people working with me, some of whose work you were listening to tonight, and we all sort of would bandy these ideas back and forth. Well, what would Buffy believe? What would, and we do change from moment to moment, and sometimes our morality is incredibly convenient, and part of the usefulness of religion is keeping us from making it too convenient. Well, it's wrong to kill, but this time, it is a way. But at the same time, trying very hard to get rid of the notion of what I think is the most destructive, sin, which I think is just a way of making people feel bad about themselves instead of their actions, and just taking those things apart a little bit. Particularly in Firefly, but also with Buffy, by always changing the game on her, always changing, the game, where she is as a person. I mean, if nobody here has changed their mind about something over the years, then I was making a terrible mistake. But if any one of you ever has, then I think that's part of the condition of humanity is, I knew exactly who I was when things were exactly as I understood them, and now they're not. So who am I this time?
So we are both writing for film and television majors, and I know we're making with the cliche here, but you're the reason we do what we do. And
It's not
our
cliche,
question,
that's an awesome.
yes. And our question for you is, maybe in circa 3 years, maybe now, if you had any job opportunities for us.
We can already feel the sparkage emanating between us.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We feel it.
It's what is that called? Air. No. Bless your hearts. No, I don't, actually. No, 3 years from now, I don't know. 8 months ago, I thought it would be really convenient for me to fly to Boston and talk about God. And no, that was not so much. But keep me in mind.
We will. We'll talk later.
I'm sorry?
What? We'll talk later.
We'll talk later about
Also, other question. What does 5 by 5 mean?
It means everything's fine. It's an aeronautics term. It's from the military, I think. I'm not sure if it's just military, but it means, it's all fine.
Hi.
They use it in Aliens. I have never had an original thought.
My name is Heather McManus, and I'm a PhD student at the medical school. And my question is, based along the lines that I never realized how much comfort I took in the Buffyverse, the fact that people went to heaven or they went to hell or they could come back, until Fred was killed and her soul was supposedly completely destroyed. And it was extremely unsettling. So I was always wondering what your thought process was behind completely destroying her and having her be dead, and sort of if you realized how strongly your audience was going to react to that as well.
Well, you're not the first person. This is just recently somebody else said this to me about the soul, that they were very upset when I killed Fred's soul, which I didn't even think about at the time. All I was thinking about was, Amy Acker is so cool, and she's going to blow everybody away. And obviously, had this series progressed, we were going to be bringing more and more of Fred out in Illyria. and make her, have the dual sort of battle. So, of course, my saying that her soul was destroyed, which really did upset some people very much, was, as is most of the death in my fantasy shows, fairly meaningless, and was just a way of saying, we're not buying this back. Illyria is the new character on the show. So I didn't realize how damaging it would be, but that's what we were trying to do. Sorry. Awkward.
Hi, my name's Tom Ehrenfeld, and just thank you so much. Thank you. We love everything you do. From my heart. My 12-year-old did the dance of joy 2 nights ago, just so you know.
Can they teach me?
Sure. I'm struck by, I love Buffy, and it's about demons, and then it's about demons. And it's just always amazed me how wonderfully you tell stories that are so captivating, and then you can just see them as stories, or then later just really kind of get your teeth into them, and the way that over time with Buffy they just build and get deeper and richer. And the question I have is kind of how, whether there's like a knob that modulates between kind of drama and didacticism, and in particular, it has to do with how motivated you are to kind of make a point. You mentioned, in particular, like you mentioned Obama. The day he was elected, Prop 8 was voted in California. I'm not going to presume where you stand, but my point is...
You can go ahead and presume. I had just married 2 friends of mine a month before.
My question is, a lot of people feel, are there times where you're a dramatist and you have a gift for injecting this meaning into stories? Are there times where you feel there's limits to it? Are there times where you write stuff because you really want to make a message? Where does that sit for you?
Really the only thing I'm trying to do when I'm writing is put my hero through the ringer. That's it. I want to find the next thing, and then I want to honor them. I want to do stuff like write the Buffy gets an award at the prom speech, which, I spent 2.5 hours listening to the last track of the Shawshank Redemption and crying and typing, and it's just about finding those. It's about finding what's the worst situation, what's the most beautiful payoff. It's the thing with Illyria's soul was to make it with Fred's soul rather, was to make it very clear to people that this was, a change. And as I said, Killing Angel was, a classic dramatic turn. It was nothing more than that. Ultimately, people came to these things and they saw who was behind them. And again, I reference not just myself, but my staff, my staffs. And they saw the thinking behind them, and all of that thinking went into it. There were times, the only times when we really thought about the message was when I thought that it was going off message. For example, when Willow and Amy are having their magic binge in the much beloved season 6 of Buffy, there was a moment where some guys are like, oh, we want to dance or whatever, and she puts them in a cage dancing, and somebody had said, the original pitch was that they make out. And I was like, okay, I think that's going to send a really weird message about, punishing them with homosexuality. I don't think we're going to go there. I think we're going to change that. And if they want to see somebody on exhibit, let's put them on exhibit. There are moments then when we sit down and go, okay, let's really talk about the politics of this thing. But that's only when, we feel like something, really derogatory, something really offensive might happen. Now, speaking of offensive, I'm into Dollhouse. And that's a situation where it has been twice as difficult, if not more so, for me to do, not just because of all the mishigas with the network, but because of the expectations, having come out publicly as a professed feminist and a professed, humanist. Everybody is judging what I do by that. And I just read today an article in, I think, the Washington Post that said fans are calling Dollhouse a feminist screed, but we're not seeing it. Well, I'm not seeing it either because it's not. It's a work of fiction that I am creating. And if you start doing that, if you start using your drama for didacticism just to make a point, you're not making drama, you're speech writing. And people will smell it and they will walk away because it is not the human condition to be told what to do, it's the human condition to try to figure it out. And that's what the characters should be going through.
Hi, I'm Richard Bellamy. I'm an entertainment business student at Emerson. I have a question, but first I need your instruction on something. Since we're not watching it live tonight, should we watch Dollhouse on DVR or should we be buying it on something like iTunes, which is going to benefit you more? But my actual question is, and I feel like you've talked around this issue without directly answering it. I do think that humans naturally have a sense of right and wrong and what we should be doing, but if that doesn't come from a God that wants us to do that, what is the source? Where does that come from?
I have to believe that it comes from our two things. One, our desire to exist, because as soon as it's okay to knock somebody over the head with your club, you can be knocked over the head with your club. One of the books I read on Buddhism said very specifically that people have always made the mistake. It's not do unto others, it's do not do unto others, what you do not wish to be done. Because you might say, it's great to party and throw up and start fights. We love that, but other people might not. So it's not what you'd want done, it's what you wouldn't want done. And I think that is ultimately part of our makeup. We shy away from doing violent things to one another as a survival instinct. I think also, however, that we are an evolving species. And I know this because I met a guy with 4 toes and who lived in a tree. So what's that? He had a house built around a tree, but he only had 4 toes because we don't need them to climb the tree anymore. So we're getting rid of those. Toes are going away. We are evolving. And I think ultimately the basis of that was laid by the species in an animalistic way to survive as our numbers grew and we started clustering around the same fires and whatnot. Then as we evolved apart from the animals, we basically realized that we had to do this, and we used religion to do it. Religion was the tool. The idea that you shouldn't kill each other comes from our burgeoning, and I think at this point still somewhat nascent, consciousness. Okay, we are aware of the world. We are aware of ourselves. Occasionally we notice other people too. But this is still a new phenomenon, and we are still building ourselves. We are going from infant to child to adult. Right now I would say, the world is in possibly, it's a tweener stage. The world is a big Jonas Brothers fan. And, we have not gotten where if we don't destroy the world, we can actually get to. So it is a part of our very real evolution that's happening now. It doesn't come from God, but right now we all live having grown up with the idea that it came from religion. Religion came from it. Religion came from the fact that we knew it was wrong. Now, okay, so what's wrong if nobody's there to tell you what's wrong? Well, if hurting another person isn't the very basis for the concept of wrong, then I don't understand anything and I should not be standing here. Okay, that is the very absolute basic thing. You protect yourself and your family by not hurting others. And ultimately, we used religion to codify that. It's going to be very hard to figure out a way to get people to come on board with that without it, or without assuming that we're just trying to co-opt something that belongs to religion, but it does, as I said in my little speechy, predate religion. So I think it's just a part of us that's growing, as we hopefully are.
And how should we watch Dollhouse?
I'm sorry, I totally buried my lead there. Any way you like, sweetheart. All right, DVR. Sorry, DVR, River, what else do I do? She really loves Spike. or Satsu, I'm not sure.
Hi, my name is Radha. I would say that these very important ideas that we're talking about tonight come so naturally to you and get incorporated so seamlessly into your work. And I find myself frustrated a lot of the time because there doesn't seem to be a lot of that coming out of the rest of your industry. I mean, for a long time after Buffy, I just didn't watch any shows because nothing was giving that like rich, meaty goodness that your work seems to give so easily, and it resonates so well. I mean, where would you say that people in your industry sort of diverge or don't seem to meet that mark or that goal that you seem to meet so easily for so many people?
Well, I'm glad you brought up my bitterness, because I was afraid it was going to fall by the wayside. I think there are certain things that have come on. The truth is I don't watch a great deal of television. I think it was around the time of Joe Millionaire that I thought, I think I might not want to turn this machine on anymore. I'll use the blender instead. But at the same time, I also watched episodes of Battlestar Galactica that were 20 times more subversive and intelligent in their storytelling than I could ever hope to be. So it's out there. The industry is not especially interested in protecting it. Basically, it's the stars have to line up. Somebody like Ron Moore has to be given the floor. The toy box, and that quite frankly it doesn't happen that often. When it does, there's usually somebody who's trying to ruin it. So it's difficult. It's a difficult system. I feel that there are episodes of Dollhouse that don't really say anything, and I'm ashamed of that. Because I'm not interested in diverting people. I mean, I am. I want them to be entertained. I don't want to be like this guy. Just film me talking. It'll be awesome. I want people to have fun, and there's a speedboat, and oh, she's sexy, and all that stuff. It's good. It's good. But if the episode isn't about something, if it isn't about the thing that it's looking at, if the cult episode doesn't tell you something about why we want to be in a cult and what that has to do with a Dollhouse, then on some level we failed. But just getting an hour of television, in our case it was closer to an hour than any other show because they did the remote free TV thing, which meant we had to do 10 minutes more every episode, which was completely ridiculous because it blew up our schedule, is incredibly difficult. So I think that A, it's hard enough to get it done, and B, a lot of people are there just to divert and to entertain, and in procedurals they're there to catch the villain and do the thing and make comfort food to an extent. And I don't actually think there's anything wrong with that. I watch procedurals sometimes. I watch funny shows that are just funny. I don't think I've learned a lot of life lessons from 30 Rock, but I'm pretty much tuning in. But that's just not what I want to do. So you have to have the person who's got the intent and got the opportunity. The opportunity I got because for a little while, I flew under the radar. The studios, the networks rather, that showed my shows no longer exist. Somebody described it like Camelot. It's disappeared into the mist, which I think is a lot nicer than calling it the CW. But. So it's just, a lot of stars have to align, and they very seldom do. And it's getting, as the networks as the industry gets more and more panicky, I don't think it's going to get better, but you'll see pockets of things that are very worthy. And I know there have been a lot of shows besides Battlestar that are. I just know about Battlestar.
Thank you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Sorry. Just to remind everyone, we have the schedule until 9:45. So we're sorry we won't be able to make it to everyone's questions, but Joss also wanted me to remind him to keep his answers as short as possible if he wants to keep people happy.
Sorry.
Hi, my name is Feather, and I have a two-part question that I'll try to make quick. I know that for Firefly, you said that it was specifically influenced by especially objects in space, Sartre and Camus. And I was wondering, since Dollhouse is obviously a lot about the nature of humanity, if there were any specific philosophical works that influenced you. And the second part I've been waiting to ask since I was 13 years old. What was the deal with the first evil? Like, was it actually evil incarnate, or was it just the first demon? And why was it so incompetent? But I love your work.
No, believe me, the first question I got tonight was, your work is so fabulous. Why do some of your episodes suck? And then they were then listed for my listening pleasure. First Evil was really ultimately a convenience. We probably would have figured it out a little bit more had we gone on further, but it was really just a chance to, be awful, raise the stakes, and then have that cool scene at the beginning of season 7 where it was all the villains at once. I got no excuse there. It was incompetent. The bad guys were always incompetent, and the reporter never catches up with David Banner, and that's how television works. What was the other one?
Is there any Dollhouse required reading that you would recommend?
Right, required reading. It's not Maxim. Ultimately that literally came out of my conversation with Eliza about the nature of what she was trying to do and the business she was in, and was ultimately a metaphor for that that sort of ballooned once we realized, oh, that's really something everybody goes through. It wasn't meant to be philosophical, but then we got into the identity stuff and we started to ask the questions, and then Tim Minear started talking about the gods and why we create them, and it turned into my usual hodgepodge. You'll see.
Thank you. Hi, Joss Whedon. My name is Virginia Hoffman, and I'm a Wellesley College senior. My first statement is truth or dare. You gotta pick one.
Okay, let's go with truth.
All right.
I know you were looking for dare, and I'm not dancing.
My question comes from the fact that Echo is a very complex character and that you don't have a single consistent personality. And in many ways, it makes us hard to connect with her because she's constantly changing. I was wondering how it is to write for this character and how probably difficult it is, but also are we going to see a more sympathetic character, because in a lot of ways I think that she's come off, at least her original person Caroline is often she has very strong opinions, and which goes along with your work exactly, but oftentimes...
We don't want to say the word bitch in a church.
No, but oftentimes she doesn't make the right choices, and that's the reason why she's at the Dollhouse in the first place. So, expound.
Shortly. Echo was always terribly sympathetic to me because she was such a naif, and part of the problem with the whole process was that because we were doing everything out of order and rejiggering everything and trying to please the network and staying out of the Dollhouse more, we didn't really get a chance to spend as much time with her as I wanted. But ultimately, yes, she is something of a non-character, but the idea behind her was that she was someone who would create herself out of scratch, which for me is not dissimilar to River's journey, but is terribly poignant. Not so much apparently to America, so good work there, Joss. But, and Caroline, her past at this point, we were sort of laying down the boilerplate just to give people a taste of it. And I took out the scene where she made a penis puppet for her boyfriend because it just didn't work. No, Liz and Sarah wrote a whole scene. We filmed it and everything. But she was very cute in it.
May I suggest penis pumpkin carving? It works better. So.
I'm so scared.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Liz Kim, and you are my hero, just to get that out there. I have a quick two-part question. First, I was just wondering, you've always had these amazing, groundbreaking female characters, and you just said Dollhouse is not a feminist show, but do you think it's problematic at all that the women in the show are sort of inherently objectified because they are dolls, and that they fit a very narrow definition of beauty, or are you just making some sort of meta commentary on how women are treated in society? And second question, are we ever going to see an active name golf or a hotel?
I did have a run about golf, but we cut it. So no, golf and hotel, not this season. So no.
Okay.
Oh, I'm such a pessimist. And the other thing, the idea was always that, and it kind of, again, got swallowed up when we were rejiggering the thing. But the idea was, yes, there are male actives, there are female actives, there are older actives, there are heavy actives, there are people of all, sizes, races, body types, blah, blah, blah. Because everybody's fantasy is different. One of the things that I was interested in when I first conceived of the idea was, what do we want from people? Because everybody doesn't want, an anorexic Hollywood blonde. That's not the thing. And we got so caught up in trying not to be shut down that some of our ideals we sort of had to shelve and just sort of wait. I had like a scene with an older woman who was an active in the scrapped pilot, stuff like that. It just sort of it was definitely, objectification was definitely in the mix, even though it was men and women. That was part of the thing, but it was really about how we all objectify everybody who is not us, how all our relationships with other people are ultimately us projecting something onto them. And so hopefully we'll get to that.
Thank you. Hi, I'm a film major at Emerson College, and I was actually wondering what camera you shoot Dollhouse on and whether you prefer film or digital.
It's a movie camera. It's film. It is film. The infamous, at least if you've been following the internet for the last day, now infamous 13th episode, was largely shot on video. It's somewhat different than the other episodes. And I would really be grateful if you all got a chance to see it on the air. There are a lot of questions I've been asked about Dollhouse that are answered, or at least dealt with in it, and all on vid, so everybody wins.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry I don't know, names of things. They don't let me near the dolly. Every time I touch it, it starts rolling downhill, and I'm not very technical.
Hi, I'm also a budding cinematographer, and I was just wondering what you like most in the directors of photography that you've worked with. What sort of qualities do you look for?
Speed. And can I ever stress this enough? Speed, a positive attitude. There's a lot of DPs who make pretty pictures, but they take a long time to do it, or they sit in their chair and point at other guys to do it, or they just come at every problem with kind of negativity that just sticks an oar in the water when you're trying to row faster. It's really, really tough. When I worked with David Boyd on Firefly, he lit in a way that really responds to the way film is today, which is incredibly sensitive, and he lit environmentally. So instead of the old Hollywood school of, here's your close-up, and in 40 minutes we can turn around and get his, he'd light the whole room and say, go. And we'd be like, we can shoot? He's like, they're already pretty. And he made, that's probably the most, that looks more like a movie than any show I ever did. So I've worked with a lot of really talented guys who've given me very beautiful stuff, but the thing I complain about the most is making sure that we keep the energy up, keep the speed going so that we can give the floor to the actors, who at that point should be owning it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm a sophomore at MIT, and in watching Firefly, one comes to realize that it's a ship populated with exceptional people, an expert pilot, an expert mechanic, an expert medic, an expert companion. And I was wondering, how does such a group of people come to be so very exceptional, or even, does it really matter how they came to be that way? It is true that I try to write just, everyday Joes, and I end up with the X-Men, every time. Ultimately, it's just,
it's wish fulfillment on my part. It's like, well, they're all my little avatars. I want them to be the best at what they do, I got no excuse. That's it. I just think it makes them neat.
We like it too. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm a senior directing student at Emerson College. And I was wondering, have you ever had an idea beyond Firefly, which you translated into Serenity for the screen, that you felt would be better served as a movie versus a TV show?
From any of my existings, you mean?
Yeah, or like, is there a project in the future that you'd be more interested in creating into a film as opposed to a television program?
Absolutely. Some things are just movies, and some things are just TV shows. Some things are comic books, and at least one thing is a ballet. So, these things, every now and then you might take the germ of something and stick it. There was something that I had been toying with as a movie or possibly a comic miniseries. Like I had both in my head when I was working on it. And I ended up gutting it and pirating parts for Dollhouse. But Dollhouse was designed very specifically to be a television show. This was another thing. It's really about how much of it is premise that can pay off in a certain amount of time, and how much of it is just unspooling a sort of thread of questions for a long, long while. But that structure is always unique, and I think people do a disservice sometimes when they try to translate something from one medium to another. Sometimes it works out great, but they're always making something different. So there is no real connection between the movie MASH and the TV show. They're just both great.
Thank you.
All right, we'll only be able to take 3 more questions after this, unfortunately. I apologize to those who have been waiting in line. And yeah.
Okay.
Especially if they're dressed like Evil Vamp Willow.
First, I really want to say thank you. Thank you. And I was wondering, why do you always make your couples end up really unhappy or dead? And also, I was wondering if the dolls keep glitching because Topher's running them on a PC.
That is, I'm telling you, Dollhouse Vista did not work out. That was just bad. Yes, that is true. Also, couples not ending so well. Basically, that's just a function of, the nature of drama, particularly serialized drama. People are either getting together or coming apart. They're like atoms bouncing around. If they just cluster and sit there, nobody tunes in. The only exception was I would never, ever, ever have broken up Zoe and Wash if the show had stayed on the air.
Then why'd you kill him?
I had to.
Why not Jane?
What?
Why not Jane?
Because you asked that question. Because they'd be looking for it with Jane. You got to kill the one they don't expect. I do still want to hurt you all.
Hi, I'm Liz. I used to be a television major because of you, but then I decided to teach first grade instead.
Given the nature of my little speech, I think that's awesome. Good.
So I loved season 4 of Angel, but I've had a question that's been bugging me about it.
All right.
So in season 4, when Angel loses his soul, there's a lot of emphasis from the characters, and especially in the episode Orpheus, about Angel and Angelus being 2 separate people trapped in one body. But it seems like that would really undermine the theme of redemption that Angel is built upon. So I just need to know, are they really 2 separate consciousnesses in one body, or is that just a way for the other characters to rationalize their friend being a killer?
Well, think of it as the same consciousness with 2 different sets of, moral structures, basically. When we first designed the show, David Greenwald and I talked a lot about alcoholism and addiction, and people who had become, without actually changing themselves, something that they found appalling and reprehensible and nearly killed themselves. And it's Hollywood, I know, and I think everybody knows people like that. And ultimately, that's what it was about. So, yes, we said they were different because the mythology was that a demon inhabits your soul, takes your personality and your memories and everything like that, uses them as you would, which is, people talk about the demon in the bottle for a specific reason, and we were basically doing the same thing. So ultimately, you need to have it both ways. You have to have your mythology, and then you have to have your emotional reality. So both. The answer is yes to both.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Krista. I believe you're the world's best character story arc developer. Because of that, I think that would make you also the world's best role-playing game master ever, putting your heroes through the ringer and with or without blissful payoff. Could you comment briefly on the role and course of redemption in your character development?
Redemption is just, I mean, it's so at the heart of everything. Even Buffy ultimately did 100 things that she needed to be redeemed for. There are two things that interest me, and they're both power, ultimately. One is not having it, and one is abusing it. And I think we all go through, and I definitely know that I went in my life through a period for a long time of having none, to not realizing I had it and abusing it, and to an understanding of that and wishing to be redeemed for it. And I think that's, just part of the maturation process. It's one of the most essential things. And again, I want to separate that from a religious idea like original sin, which pisses me off to no end, because when you feel bad about everything, you let yourself get away with everything. But if you feel bad about only the things you have actually done that are wrong, then you are on a path to redemption, which I don't think there's anybody who doesn't need to be on that path every now and again. Here we go.
I have a question. An internet musical is a wacky idea that's zany. Where did it come from?
It came from pain.
I have a serious question as well. On Buffy and Angel, the forces of evil are very clearly defined. There's, vampires and demons and the forces of darkness, but good, except in as much as the characters, is very intangible. The closest thing we have is the powers that be on Angel, who are sort of esoteric and only really talk through the visions and don't do much else. Do you feel that, is that because of your humanist influence, or was it just sort of, that's how the plots worked out?
Well, both. The plots work out as they work out for our convenience. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, you will find that the forces of darkness seem to control everything, and when you are good, you are on your own. I do believe, and this shows up in pretty much everything I write. It was in Wonder Woman, that we were basically under the heel of the gods, though we did not know it. There cannot be any connection to my having worked at News Corp for 14 years and my writing these stories, but there can be the fact that the one thing that is true throughout the world is this enormous inequity between rich and poor, between the powerful and the masses. I mean, the fact of the matter is, powerful people control the lives of everybody in this and every country, and they tend to use them and discard them, and it's a terrible, terrible system that has resulted in this country in economic chaos at last, because it's been crumbling for a while, and ultimately is a huge theme for me, is the theme of oppression. Because the terrible things that people do, they very often do at the behest of much more terrible people who don't have to do it themselves. The people who wage wars don't go to war. The little boys who are being indoctrinated to be, to take machetes and go kill their families are not the problem. The problem is the people with the power. So I think everybody who has power is on some level abusing it. And hopefully that's going to change. Hopefully some change is coming, but it's been particularly prevalent in the last decade. And so it's found its way into my work. I don't think it ever will stop. As long as I'm writing, I hope sometime after I'm gone, nobody will have to write about that anymore.
Thank you.
Hi, Joss. Hi. So you touched on this in terms of Wash, but throughout your work, romances tend to end in tragedy, not just ending, but ending in tragedy, oftentimes immediate tragedy. So is there a moral we're meant to take from that, or is it always done for dramatic effect? And also, when can we expect to see the Dollhouse musical episode?
Dollhouse musical episode, not so much. Although, quite frankly, if I could hire an active, we'd be singing. I'm just saying. And there would be a hidden backing orchestra somewhere, and she'd know all the words and the steps. The formula is, if you can get tragedy, if you can get to tragedy, tragedy is good. Tragedy is that's a good one. That's one we're after. That really helps. Keeps your spirits up. The other form for me is always simply randomness. The randomness and suddenness of death. Not of one's own, but of well, you saw the thing from the body. The body was, there's no moral. The body was about, there's no moral. The body was about a lack of catharsis. The body was simply about the emotional and physical, physical to an almost morbid point of the reality of the first 24 hours after someone you love has died. And the fact that people took something from it that was cathartic was actually shocking to me, because I was only trying to express something that I had gone through. There was no story there. So ultimately, it's either I'm trying to wring the best juice I can out of destroying people and breaking their heart into 1,000 little pieces, which is funny, and good television, or I want to make a very real statement about my experience of the world, which is that anything can be taken from you very suddenly at any time, and we all go through that at some point, and to see somebody else go through it is something of a comfort.
Thank you.
Thank you all.